Hello, folks. I have a bit of a different video today. I have an upcoming Helminth build guide that I've been working on for a couple of days with Frost, and I figured it would be pertinent to make this video in this case. I'm gonna try something a bit different from my normal style. I haven't done sort of a video like this before, but a sort of a, I don't know, kind of a meta commentary thing, sort of like a reply to stuff that's going on. Let me know in the comments if like this sort of content is something you're interested in, or if you want to actually sort of watch me play the game instead of doing this, which comes off more as sort of like a podcasty kind of thing. Anyway, God, I never know how to pronounce his name. Is it Brozime? Is it Brozime? Who knows? I probably should know. Let's say Brozime. He put out a video yesterday talking about Frost and like how Frost could be in need of a rework. So I figured it was, since I'm making like a Helminth Frost video, it's gonna come out a bit later. Probably pretty good to sort of like get this out of the way and toss in my 5 cents into that discussion, because why not? His argument, basically, for why Frost needs to be reworked is, I guess kind of that sort of like the game has passed him by, if that makes sense. Seeing as how like he came out in 2014 and his kit is sort of like designed around what Warframe looked like in 2014, and as the game has evolved, the game is very different now from what it was back then, and I guess damage numbers are up, power creep has happened, the game is faster, definitely, and the argument would be that like Frost is too slow and not powerful enough, I guess, in essence. So he sort of suggested that like Frost is one of the Warframes that's like most in need of a rework. I kind of disagree with this. I kind of disagree, and I'll kind of explain why, so people sort of understand where I'm coming from with this. Like I understand a lot of where he's coming from with it, and his ideas for a rework are interesting. But I think it's a matter of perspective. You know, Brozime, and probably me too, when I make these Helminth guide videos, we're approaching this from the perspective of endgame players, if that's a word. I mean, Warframe doesn't really have any endgame other than what you sort of want to do for yourself. But say these high-level players who have all of the resources and the gear and the know-how to approach like the more difficult or like sort of scaled up stuff in the game. And looking, so when I make build videos, I sort of look at stuff that can improve on that and sort of like take a Warframe and like push it to the next level, stuff like that. But the point is, that's our perspective. And that is just not the perspective like that's going to be relevant for most players of the game. And I'm not even talking about you viewers either. If you're the kind of person who just goes on YouTube and watches like Warframe content creators and just actually follows these channels and listens to what we have to say, that by itself means that you are not one of the casual players. You are not... You probably belong to a very small minority of players of this game. Like, keep in mind that this is a free-to-play game. It's been around for many, many years. It's popular in many countries that have huge populations and whatnot. And this is kind of sad. You can go to sort of like any game in your Steam library and look at sort of the achievements for it, and you will get sort of mind blown by just how not obsessive about games most people are, and how most people just don't play games for very long, or they play them very casually. Hell, just I went to like my Steam library and looked at Sekiro just to see like how many people have actually beat the first boss of the game. And that number is like 50%, something like that. And that's a AAA game that people paid like $50 for. And like not even half of all players of that game just even beat the first boss before they dropped it and put it down. So I guess it's like something you kind of forget after a while, that like most people in this game are very like super casual players, probably haven't even completed the star chart. They pick it up, they play it for a couple of hours per week at most. They progress at sort of like a snail's pace, and for them it's sort of like it's a completely different perspective that you get on like scaling of abilities and warframes and power strength. And for them, since they don't have all of these ludicrous things that you get in the end game that sort of makes everything blend together, right? You can take any warframe and just give it a Chronon Prime with a powerful Riven mod and all of the right mods upgraded to maximum, and you can just kill anything in the game. Doesn't matter. Frost can do it, Garuda can do it, Loki can do it, anyone can do it. That's like, damage is not a problem. But if you're not one of those players, if you're someone who's just running around with kind of basic stuff, it's like, yeah, you got your serration mod for your rifle, that's nice. And hey, you got some elemental mods for your weapons. Maybe you've ran enough sort of low-level spy missions to have the cold and heat dual status mods for your weapons, right? Something like that. Wow. You can do more damage than Ted, who's sitting in the next cubicle as you're playing at work. What do I know? But that's the level that most players are at. I mean, hell, let's go and take a look at the Steam achievements, right? For Warframe. And let's look at the global achievements and sort of like see where people are at. Now keep in mind, these numbers are extra low for Warframe because it's a free-to-play game, so a lot of players just pick it up, they play it for like a couple of hours and then drop it and never play it again, so that's fine. Hence why like just only 2/3 of all players have even solved a single cipher and hacked the console. That's the most common achievement that people have. The most common achievement, and that's 2/3 of all players. So this 1/3, they played the game for less than an hour before they dropped it. Something like that, right? Hell, 60% of all players have earned 1,000 credits. So you have to sort of account for the fact that this blob here are players who just have not even played the game. You can just skip the first 40% or so. They don't count. But going down a bit on the list is like, 41% of all players have played the game for 2 hours. Yeah. Gotta go down a bit further to see some more relevant numbers for like people who stuck around a bit more. 20% of all players have obtained a Sentinel, right? 20% of all players have obtained a second Warframe. And I'm gonna say for most of those, it's probably because they purchased a Warframe that they wanted to play with. Not that they actually crafted it. 2% of all players have killed a Kuvalich. Yeah. 2% of all players. 98% of all players have not done that. So, if you are watching this video, and you are a person who has killed a Kuvalich, congratulations, you belong to the top 2 most dedicated parts of the entire player base of this game. Like, that's what we're talking about. So if you look at, like, the player progression for, like, a sort of a normal player of the game, I'm gonna say, or, like, the vast majority, right? For them, Warframes are going to be very much more like differentiated from each other. They're going to be able to do sort of specific tools and tasks and stuff that others can't do. If you look at the starter frames, they all have sort of their strengths and weaknesses, but they aren't really standouts in their kits. They can do a little bit of everything, but nothing like super impressively. most people's first Warframe that they craft, if they start making new Warframes, are probably going to be like a Rhino. And a Rhino is basically just a souped up version of the starter Warframes, at least until you sort of get to these endgame builds. He's tough, he's tanky, he can give himself more damage and stuff, but he doesn't have sort of like a standout mission type that he sort of excels in more than anyone else. He's just kind of good at everything. I guess you could sort of like farm Vehek, right, for High Lord or something like that. But for most people, they're just going to progress in the game. They're going to get to Mars, and, you know, there's Excalibur, and they're going to get to Phobos, and there's Mag. And then they get to Ceres, which is where you get Frost. So for most people, Frost is the first specialist Warframe that you will encounter as a new player, that you will get. The exception would be like Gara, because Gara is also a Warframe that you theoretically, like conceivably, can get very early in the game, but you can get Gara very early on in the game if you know exactly what you're doing. But most people aren't going to go to the open world sections that early on. That's something you explore a bit later. So it's going to be Frost. And what Frost has going for him is that he's kind of easy to understand how he's supposed to play. He's not that hard to figure out how his skills work. They're very simplistic in their nature. And he is a specialist. He can do something that none of the previous Warframes that you have encountered in the game can do, and that is that he excels in defense missions. He can defend objectives. But if you look at his kit, it's like so simple. Number 1, you shoot a small projectile. Number 2, you shoot a bigger projectile that goes in like a cone. Okay, so it's like a more souped up version of number 1. That's what a new player's gonna think. Number 3, your snow globe, your bread and butter as a Frost. You defend an objective. You put it on the objective and you defend it. And then you have your alt, which is just like you freeze everything around you. Big kabam, feels good, feels nice. It's like super simple. Frost is designed for a new player. Frost is designed for when you get him. He won't overwhelm you with sort of complexity in what he can or can't do. The game simply tells you this guy is your defense Warframe. This guy is the guy who defends objectives. That's what he does. And it's gonna be a bit longer until you get like another Warframe that can sort of do the same things. You get Limbo later on, but Limbo is way more complex in how he plays. And it requires a better sort of understanding as a player to sort of figuring him out. But Frost is easy. Frost is easy. Everyone can sort of like play with him for 5 minutes and you understand how he works. And that's his role. That's what he's supposed to do. And I get that sort of like as you get later on into the game and you sort of get to these endgame builds, that's where he sort of trails off and he can't compete with some of the other Warframes in the game. He has his uses. I know that people think that like, oh, if you can't do Steel Path survival for 5 hours straight, then you're shit. But it's like, that's not the only thing that this game has to offer. In fact, that's something that the game only has to offer for a abysmally small portion of the player base who's even into that in the first place. Like, most players aren't like that. Most players don't do those 5 hour long survival missions. I wouldn't even dream of it. They wouldn't even think it's fun. They like doing their Kuvalich hunting. They like doing their sorties. They like doing their relic missions and stuff like that. And that's like what they need Warframes for. You know, Frost still has his sort of like use cases where like stuff he can do better than anyone else. Frost can do excavation missions better than anyone else. Because Frost can defend several objectives at the same time. Which, you know, most other Warframes in the game cannot do. Or at least they can't do it as well as he can. And excavation, hey, that's a mission type. And it's even sort of a relevant endgame mission type. You can get like arbitrations and stuff. He can do RBs good. He can do defense missions good. He can do mobile defense missions good. There's a lot of stuff he can do good. But he can't do the big survival things where you have to kill all the things and survive for 5 hours straight. No, he can't do that. Well, that's fine. Doesn't have to be able to do that. There's more to the game than Steel Path Survival or Kuva Survival or whatever. And I guess, like, I like the fact that Warframes are differentiated from each other. I like the fact that not everyone is good at everything, and not everyone has to be good at everything. It's fine if not everyone is good at everything. To be honest, if you look at some of the things that Brozim suggested for Frost, I mean, it sounds good, like, at first glance. It's like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool and stuff. But then when you sort of look at what he's actually suggesting, it starts to get a bit ridiculous. I like the idea that he threw out about, you know, freezing the ground. Because his skills do effects that give, like, a visual thing of frozen ground. You can see it with all of his, you know, abilities. Like, oh, cool, frozen ground. But it doesn't do anything. And he's just said, like, oh, you could do it, make it so that, like, his frozen ground actually does stuff when you get bonuses if you stand on it. That's a neat little idea, a thing you could do for him. That's also a thing that makes him more complex and less accessible to a new player if you sort of understand or figure out that, like, that's what you're supposed to be doing at all time and keeping track of that. And then it's like, you know, he suggested for his number 2 ability, right? That it would get, like, a damage multiplier based on how many people you hit with it. And it would get cost reduced if you spam it so that you can spam it. And you should make it so that, like, if you stand on the frozen ground, you get, like, 80% damage reduction. And it's like, wow. Wow. Why not throw in that like, you every time he presses the number 2 button, you get, like, a Christmas gift delivered to your house as well. It's like, come on, man. Come on. No, that's too much. And that sort of ties into the idea of, like, how not every Warframe needs to be able to do everything. Because that's the suggestion here. That Frost should still be able to defend objectives with his snow globe. But now he will also become a tank with 80% damage reduction, and he will get a spammable damaging ability that has, like, damage multipliers based on enemy density. Perfect for throwing him into stuff like Steel Path Survival with massive amounts of enemies so that you can just turn Frost into a nuke frame. Now everyone's a nuke frame. No, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna be snarky and stuff. Like, I understand. Like, a lot of his ideas are good. The frozen ground stuff is cool. I like that. But not every Warframe needs to be good at everything. I like the fact that they're differentiated. And not every Warframe needs to be a nuke frame. I saw another sort of video talking about, like, the helmet system and Frost. And had discovered sort of a cool interaction where Frost can use his snow globe to one-shot any enemy in the game. Sort of like a similar thing like, you know, Tesla Limbo or whatever. Where it's like, this is guaranteed to do 100% damage to any enemy in the game. I looked at the comment section, and there was one comment there that was kind of poignant that I, like, sort of stuck on. Where someone just wrote sort of like, yeah, that's cool and all, but I'm a Frost player and that doesn't interest me because that's not why I play Frost. I wouldn't sort of do this because that's not what I'm after when I load up my Frost and go to play with him. It's just some thoughts. It's just some thoughts I had about, like, just, you know, class identity, if we're gonna use that word. So I'm making a Frost build guide. I'm gonna go in a completely different direction with that. Not gonna talk about here's how you can make Frost do Steel Path Survival. I'm gonna go very traditional with that. And that video will be dedicated to the Frost players who like playing Frost. There's dozens of us out there. And it's basically just, hey, let's take Frost's kit and let's take the things that Frost can do, because he can do things. Let's take those things and just juice them up a bit. Take his normal sort of gameplay cycle, or his play style, and just make that a bit better than it already is. So that, like, if you like playing Frost and you like how he plays, hey, you can keep playing him the exact same way. It's just he's gonna be slightly better. And I think there's like room for that as well. When we talk about the sort of Warframes that need a rework, like Frost is not very high up on that list for me. I can think of a bunch of Warframes that, you know, actually fit the bill. You can talk about Warframes like Loki, for example. That's a frame that the game has absolutely sort of like outpaced. And with him, it's like he serves kind of no purpose at all in the game anymore. But Cool Boy here, Mr. Cool Boy, you know, he's still cool. Absolutely still cool. And, you know, people still play him. New players like him. Intermediate players like him. A small subset of endgame players like him, but most have sort of gravitated away from him. But, I don't know. I just feel like it could be valuable to remember sometimes that, like, the game is not balanced around the endgame players. The game is not balanced around me or Brozim or even you who are watching this video. We are a small minority, and just because we think that something isn't like sort of worth our time anymore, it doesn't mean that it's not functioning as intended. I don't know. Like, yeah, sure. There's stuff you can tweak with Frost. Everyone knows that his number 2 ability kind of doesn't serve a purpose in his kit. It's too similar to the number 1 for a new player, and too similar to his, or it's just an inferior version of his number 4 as a new player. And as an experienced player, it's like, if you have access to the helmet system, it's obvious that his number 2 ability is the one that you're gonna replace. So, yeah, you know what? I can see a case for, like, shuffling that around and making something different happen, specifically with his number 2 ability. But in general, it's like, does Frost need a rework? Nah, he kinda doesn't. Frost, he's fine. He's fine the way he is. He really is.